Empathy scarcity. What neuroscience can teach us. Hmm. We read a lot about empathy scarcity at leadership level and the impact it has on staff, on senior leadership teams, and how this empathy or lack of empathy has an impact as well on what we're meant to deliver, in our work, our community, our families, etc. So, I have today Soraya Show from Springboard, and to help me think through that theme. And I wonder, can you tell us a little bit of what your work entails?
So I basically have always been interested in psychology and in insights in people. My early career was in creative advertising, which is all about people, and then I retrained and became an executive coach, which I did for many years. And then I knew I wanted to do something, and I had the opportunity to be one of well, there was 21 of us when we started to do a MSc in applied neuroscience and organizations, and I've since a little girl, I've been fascinated by the brain and what actually ticks. So I took my master's and was one of the few people to actually finish it and pass it, because I must admit it was the most incredibly difficult thing I've ever done. But what it gives you is a huge new insight into how we operate as human beings, what we actually need. And actually coming out of COVID, and it's kind of perfectly placed really, because everyone is looking at, well, what does the new world of work look like? Is it hybrid? Is it flexible? What is it? It's a perfect opportunity to talk about what we as humans really need. So, it's building on the management theory, it's building on the psychology, behavioral science, all those wonderful things. But it's actually going, this is what's going on in your head. And as we know, we're all different, we're all neurodiverse. I mean, that's a big debate in itself. And so that's when it becomes, if we're going to move forward into this brave new world with technology, then I think coming at it from a very different human perspective is incredibly important. So that's what I do.
Wow. Wow. So I love what you say about what's going on in people's heads. It's
Yeah.
it's not a foundation. And so I wonder what you make out of this empathy thing we hear everywhere. And maybe to start us, what do you define? How do you define empathy so that we understand the same thing here?
Yeah. I think that's really interesting, because we do talk about empathizing a lot. We talk about psychological safety or neurosafety and all these important things that we need. But I actually went back to the dictionary, because I also was listening to reading something about compassion. And so I was thinking to myself, hold on a sec, I'm getting confused now. What's the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion? I'm not quite sure that I totally understand this. And when I looked at it in a nutshell, sympathy is about, you sympathize. Yeah, I'm really sorry that that happened to you. That's terrible. Empathy is when you really you almost put yourself in the other person's shoes, and you can really sense what they need and what they feel. But what I found very interesting, if you took it one step further with compassion, compassion builds on empathy, but it actually has an action component to it as well. So it's actually about, yeah, I hear what you're saying, I hear what you need, and now let's go and do something about it. So I wonder as well whether maybe this is just my raw thinking, the conversation needs to kind of step up a bit, because you can empathize with somebody. And I think we all know, as working as executive coaches and working with people, we have to protect ourselves, because we can get quite damaged by other people's emotions, because we do empathize too much. But if you actually turn it into an action, so it has a kind of a result to it, that's where my thinking is starting to go around the whole kind of empathy scarcity route.
So if I hear you well, empathy would have been to understand the lived experience of someone else, and
Yeah.
you can come back on the shoe story. And the compassion is doing that with an action or a presence, a very much a sort of a commitment to do or be something around that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I suppose if you took it as we're talking about, organizations and companies, it would be not you just caring about your colleagues or your leader or whoever, but you'll be saying, right, okay, I hear this. Now, what are we going to do about it?
Hmm. Hmm. So what's going wrong with empathy at the moment, you think, Soraya?
Do you know, I think that's such an interesting, obviously you're asking it, so it is very interesting. But I think it's because we're coming out of COVID, and I think there's something here about shared responsibility. I think there's a lot about how leaders should be or managers should be, or there's a lot of how shoulds going on. And I think that we've forgotten that actually it's about shared responsibility,
Mm.
because we're all human, and no matter what your job title is, you're coming into, whether it's switching on your computer or walking through the door, with your own issues or thoughts or concerns or excitements and positivity as well. So actually, I think there is something about it becoming a leveler as opposed to the shoulds. It should be, I think it should, I'm saying should, here we are. I think it's more about us being compassionate about everybody, and not just expecting that a certain level within an organization need to be totally responsible for it. I think this whole way of looking at self-managing flatter structures, the whole new way that we need to start considering about the world of work, that's when uh, empathy actually, I think, comes in and takes on a different role.
What I'm hearing here is also looking at that how responsibility, how we engage with the world as an individual,
Yes, yes,
stepping
definitely.
back, yeah, stepping back a little bit. And I'd love to come back on the shoes story.
Yeah. You know me and my shoes. I love my shoes, but yeah,
This is it. Said as I could put myself or imagine myself in your shoes, but when I do that, I actually still see me in your shoes.
yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a great thing in neuroscience that's called theory of mind. And
Oh,
as human beings, we need to we're always thinking about what's the other person thinking, what are they doing, and it goes back to our kind of early evolution about, are we safe? So the brain always thinking about, are we safe here, or do we need to go into fight or flight? All the things that we know on that level about the brain. So putting yourself in someone else's shoes is actually almost an automatic thing that we probably all do without really being conscious of it. And it is trying to work out what's going on for that other person. And yes, as you say quite rightly, it normally comes out that it's about me. Where's myself in that?
yeah.
But I think it's also, it's about practicing and learning about, well, how do I see, if we all look at the world through our own lens, how can I step into that person's lens and see the world through their eyes?
So I hear there's an opportunity here to listen to the other's lived experience for us to realize, well, what does it feel to be in your shoes with your feet? Because
Exactly.
I can't put
Yeah.
myself in that position. I can never physically put myself in that position, can I?
We know it's just being aware of it. So often I think we read all these things that's, listen to people and talk to people, and they're all great things to do, but
Mm.
actually putting your emotions in there and trying to strip away the way that you view the world. I'm not saying it's easy, or because that really getting to understand other people is not easy,
Mm.
as we know from coaching, how much work you have to do and training you have to do into it. But it is just about giving the other person a chance to be seen. I think that's important.
So, wow, giving the opportunity for the other person to be seen. So that's supposed a lot of space, right?
Yeah, and giving them, it's not make I think we're terrible, aren't we, with COVID and everything that's happened. We make assumptions are safe for us. If you make an assumption, you've got an answer, whether it's right or wrong, but you've got something. And maybe it is stripping away those assumptions and giving that person the space to be seen, to be heard. All the etiquette. Sometimes you're taught in meetings, don't talk over people, don't let people have their point of view, encourage people to speak up. I
Mm.
think all those skills help a person feel noticed, cared for, respected, valued. connection, building trust. I mean, God, I'm just writing a paper on trust at the moment from a neuroscience perspective, and it
Great.
really is and the anchor of everything that we do.
Mm, mm, mm. So there's that new element you're bringing, or to build empathy and gain trust, to strip in us from our, or assumption costumes, costumes with all the
Yeah,
the assumption bells and whistles. I can't even pronounce that.
yeah,
It's not getting rid, but suspending assumptions for a minute, letting a bit more space for the other person to come up to surface with all their lived experience, so that you can have a little bit of a more dense sense of who they are.
mm, mm.
And
And I think what you're doing as well from a neuro perspective is, we know that we're riddled with unconscious bias, and it only becomes conscious when you're actually in the situation, you're aware of it.
yeah.
So I think what you're doing by actually helping your brain feel uh, engaged and really focused. We know that creating focus, I think in teams it increases um, engagement by about 300% or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But when
Mhm.
you have that focus, when you really feel you're dancing the same dance, it's so incredibly powerful and rewarding. You never, I don't think in a relationship you ever go back from that, because you've connected it at a really emotional level that we don't do very often.
Oh yes, I love that metaphor of the dance, because also we learn the same step.
Yep.
We should engage practically the same muscles, but we know we won't. There will be something different, and different level of sweat, different level of artistic expression, but we
Hmm.
all we're all moving towards the same direction.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So tell me more about, you said about the we're all different, we're all wired differently, and what does that knowledge help us do or think differently?
I think once you really understand that each one of us, our brains are like our fingerprint. Everyone is completely different, which is where I think neurodiversity. I've been talking to a lot of people recently who've got dyslexia or ADHD or whatever,
Mm,
and they actually don't like being put into this box, because they do have a genius way, a different way of thinking.
mhm,
And all of us do that at one degree or another. And I wouldn't be surprised in 50 or 60 years time they find out that all of us have got well, we all know that our brains are wired differently anyway, based on our DNA, our
mm,
knowledge, our engagement, our relationships. And I think what it does is that, from a practical point of view, if you really want true diversity, having a group of different brains that think in a very different way is important for our future, because of ideas, innovation, connectedness, as technology takes over more and more and more. But I think it also makes life so rich, because it's like when you go away on holiday and you're a completely different place than you're used to, and
mm.
you meet different people. It's fascinating. You're different people from different walks of life, with different attitudes, with different accents, with different looks, with different ways of dressing, with different, it just makes us so rich as human beings, to understand that vastness of difference and experience, and how we can benefit from it.
So that's interesting. Soraya, if you say that we're molding constantly, we're molded by our experience, our thoughts, or feeling, or environment, etc., throughout the day, throughout our holidays, if we can
Yeah.
take them. So any kind of experience mold us. Why is that? That some people feel like they're resisting that molding when they go back to work.
Resistant molding. I think I'm not sure. I haven't really thought. From my angle that I come from it, I think that we've all heard about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset, and
Uh,
coming from positivity and negativity. But I do think people default to a way of being. So by nature, I think I'm a very positive person, and quite happy-go-lucky.
Mhm.
And I know, for instance, my husband is wonderful. He's grounded and very practical. So we make a really good team. You know, we bounce off each other in that way.
Mhm.
And so I think people do approach the world, as people approach the world from their lens, they may not feel comfortable with that change. That change may not resonate with them. It may not hold any value to them. It might be quite scary for them, because we know that, you know, some people find change very, very difficult. So therefore you default back to your behavior that you know and trust, because again, that's from a brain perspective, that means that you're safe. You know,
Yes.
you're quietening your amygdala, and hopefully you're switching back on your neocortex. But so from a brain perspective, it makes complete sense why some people are more uh, open to change or ideas, or learning, taking on board different learnings, whereas other people resist it. And I think that's just human nature. And I guess for us as coaches, what we've always done is we're helping people to gain insights to change those mindsets. Mindsets are very interesting in how you can change them. You can change them quite simply, actually. It's quite fascinating. Um, and
Hmm.
I think that that's something that we have done in our work. We know it and we understand it very, very well. And it's given people the confidence, really, to be able to do it. And we're all going to be got obstacles around us. I mean, it's we can all put up barriers quite easily, and it's really questioning or helping other people question whether those barriers are useful or they're not useful.
So I love here because you made the bridge between the trust that we have in others and the trust that is within. Are we in a safe space to change or not? And I also hear that we are quick to label people having a lack of empathy, but maybe we should maybe look deeper in there and see how safe do they feel
Hmm.
in performing or trying out new things,
Yeah.
even as leaders, right?
Well, I think that's quite interesting, you just saying that, because leadership, you assume that the person you're leading, or your leader, whoever they might be, your manager, whatever, that they know the answers, they know what they're doing, and you know, we know that their emotions can be picked up by people so easily. We absorb other people's emotions uh, very, very quickly. If you you know, if you think about mirror neurons and things like that.
Mm.
Um, but again, they may be having a really bad day. They may not, you know, I was doing an imposter syndrome masterclass yesterday, and most of those people were all very similar and senior, and they class themselves as, they have those days where they, you know, they walk into a room and they're like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm an imposter. I'm a fraud. I shouldn't be here. But we never, you know, we always think about it, about ourselves, but we're not thinking that actually the other people in the room or on the end of the camera are actually experiencing exactly the same thing.
Ah, yes, yes. Hence the necessity to really stretch, a little bit time to think and pause. Even in a time scarce life, a little 5 minutes to really pause
Mm,
and
yeah.
be gentle. So talking about pragmatic avenues to explore, if we want to navigate empathy differently, what would be your quick, short, snappy suggestions, Soraya?
Okay. I have, because we're all in this changing world that we're going through, I think our connected purpose is absolutely crucial if we're to have flatter structure and more self-management, and whether you're working hybrid or flexible or whatever it might be, because we need that connectedness, we need that joint purpose, common purpose to be working towards. And I think what's very, very important is actually going back. And I was doing a hybrid workshop last week with a charity, and we went back to what was their strategy, what's their purpose, what are their values, and how does that translate now 2-3 years later. So therefore, how do they need to behave? Because once we understand what the behaviors are, and that builds the culture and the rituals, you can then, you know what you're working with, people know where they are, people feel secure, they feel protected, I suppose, actually. So
Mm.
really, that's my biggest things, that it's about sharing and communicating and agreeing, you know, coming to a common understanding, even around the words, like you asking me what's my definition of empathy. My definition could be very different to somebody else's.
Mhm.
And I think just remembering the human needs, remembering what people have been through, because I think we're going to, well, we are already, aren't we, seeing some sort of um, effects of what happened, because no one's ever been through it before. So I think there needs to be that understanding there as well.
Mm.
And joint. It's not just, one way. It's complete, 360, I think, in any organization.
Mm. So I think there what I'm hearing is a very deep necessity to pause and look at these foundations, at these beliefs, these values, these narrative and stories that each and one of us has.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
that's a good.
Definitely.
It sounds like a good investment, fundamental investment, right?
I think so. I think it's very easy to be. I think we need. I think we need pragmatism somewhere. We are emotional. We are driven by our emotions.
Mhm.
But if we understand why those emotions manifest and what they actually mean, then I think you can start shaping something very differently.
Yeah, yeah, and engage people along the way to build
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly,
collective
exactly. Yeah.
collective purpose. Wonderful, Soraya. I know it's quick and short and snappy, but we want to make people hungry for more, and so we'll be sharing your websites and all data that people need to engage with you. Soraya, it was a pleasure talking to you in the House of Trust today. Thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And if I could just encourage people either to sign up to my LinkedIn or the newsletter via the website, because what I try and do is do regular updates on the brain, new research that comes through, and new ways that we can actually apply it. So if you're interested, then that's the kind of place to start.
Oh, wait, start. Fantastic. Thank you, Soraya.
All right, thank you. Speak to you later. Take care.